When you think of the hot corner and defense, who comes to mind?
I activated myself.
Brooks Robinson is the obvious choice. I mean, 16 gold gloves? Are you kidding me? Maybe the first ballot Hall of Famer, Adrian Beltre. What about current defensive wizards, Matt Chapman, Manny Machado, or Evan Longoria? Can't forget about my personal favorite, Nolan Arenado, either. All excellent choices. I'd love to go back in time too and watch Brooks play. But what if I told you that we may not need a time machine in order to witness the best defensive third baseman ever? Because by the numbers, through the 2023 season, Ke'Bryan Hayes of the Pittsburgh Pirates is off to maybe the greatest defensive start to a career by a third baseman in baseball history.
What?
Yeah, even better than Brooks. And if all goes right, which, as we'll soon see, is never that easy, he could, by the numbers, end up as the greatest defensive third baseman ever. Hold on to your butts, baseball fans. It's time to take a closer look at the brain-melting defensive numbers Hayes has put up so far in his young career, while comparing him to other defensive studs from hot corner history from a few different angles. Because what Ke'Bryan Hayes is doing defensively to start his young career, well, let's just say we might be witnessing actual history. Welcome to Good Vibes Baseball. Please consider subscribing if you haven't. I do appreciate you either way. Now let's get into some good vibes, shall we? The best defensive third baseman ever for someone who has played a total of 380 games in his career? Talk about tinfoil hat time.
I forgot to put it on earlier. They heard everything I said.
But I wouldn't make the claim if the numbers didn't tell the story themselves. And this isn't about one particular number either. We have several different avenues nowadays to measure defense statistically, and you might be shocked at how well Mr. Hayes is doing historically compared to literally any other third baseman in baseball history. By using Baseball Reference, Fangraphs, and Baseball Savant, we are able to compare Hayes' start to other greats from a few different perspectives and show that he has a real shot at this. So for each of the big three statistical resources, we are going through their defensive metrics, and we're going to show how Ke'Bryan Hayes stacks up against the all-time greats from the hot corner. Because if he can stay healthy and continue playing at this level, he genuinely could put up numbers better than even Brooks Robinson. BaseballReference.com is one of my favorite resources for baseball data, period. I could, and do, spend hours just digging through the numbers. Nerd! So it's only right that we start there. Since this is all about defense, we are going to focus on his traditional fielding percentage, his total zone runs, his R-field, or defensive runs saved from Baseball Info Solutions, and his defensive B-WAR. Looking at those four, Hayes has put up some, dare I say, historical numbers to start his career.
He said it! He said it!
In 380 total games, 374 at third base, he's put up a fielding percentage of .980 with just 22 errors, 34 total zone runs, a whopping 65 defensive runs saved, and a phenomenal 7.7 defensive B-WAR. Again, in just 380 games. I know that's not many games by comparison, approximately 3 full seasons worth, but that's a huge part of this. Aside from fielding percentage, where his .980 mark would be good for second all-time, these numbers are value numbers. If I field one ground ball in one chance, I'm fielding at 100%. That's why you don't show up on leaderboards until you play enough games. But you don't start with 100 total zone runs, for example, and work your way down. You start at 0 and have to earn every single run by playing and then playing well. So 34 total zone runs in his first 380 games may not seem like much, but you know what Brooks Robinson's total zone runs were in his first 380 or so games? 37.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
That's also giving Brooks parts of 3 years to get acclimated to the league. Ke'Bryan doesn't have that buffer. First ballot Hall of Famer Adrian Beltre is up there with Brooks for career total zone run leaders, but he didn't start out as great as Ke'Bryan, with just 21 total zone runs in more games.
That's my point exactly.
Rockies legend Nolan Arenado is immediately who I want to defend as the best modern-day defensive third baseman. But his total zone runs in about the same amount of games to start his career? Just 23. Matt Chapman is another modern-day defensive ace. He actually started out hotter than Hayes, as he put up an incredible 41 total zone runs through his first 3 years. If only John Fisher cared about the A's and invested in Chapman. Maybe those numbers continue? But alas, whether it's injuries or a change in scenery, Chapman has seen his defensive numbers dip from that historic pace in recent years, posting just 13 total zone runs in the 4 seasons since. The same can be said for Evan Longoria. He took the league by storm in 2008 and put up an excellent 39 total zone runs from 2008 through 2010 in just 41 more games than Hayes. But as with Chapman, Longoria was unable to keep that pace as his career progressed, something Ke'Bryan will absolutely have to avoid. Manny Machado is another modern defensive ace, and his total zone runs of 42 in his first 445 games are impressive. But 34 of those came in 2013 alone, and he hasn't posted a number higher than 8 in the years since. Brooks set the seemingly impossible total zone runs bar of 293 by being great for a really long time, something those others just couldn't do. And I'll admit, that total zone runs mark is probably not going to be broken, as even if Hayes played in 2,800 games, or 7 times his current amount, like Brooks, he'd only reach 238 total zone runs.
He used to be somebody I could trust.
But the total zone runs are just the start using Baseball Reference. His R field, or Baseball Reference's defensive runs saved, is where I really start to see Hayes' chance at history. Brooks Robinson's all-time record sits at 293, just like those total zone runs. The difference, though, in Hayes' first legit shot at Brooks is the sheer dominance Hayes has displayed in such a short amount of time in regards to defensive runs saved. 65 in 380 games compared to Brooks' 293 in 2,896 games. If Ke'Bryan Hayes can maintain his current pace and play as many games as Brooks Robinson, he'd put up roughly 450 defensive runs saved. Yes, I understand that we don't have the same data from then as we do now. And yes, I know that's a big if he can play 2,800 games at the same level he's at now. And yes, I know this is just one stat, but it's a big one. And 150 runs is a huge buffer to account for injuries or unforeseen events like COVID. And as far as Hayes' start to his career, of the 29 third basemen who currently rank higher than Hayes in career defensive runs saved, only Matt Chapman had a better start to his career. He put up an insane 66 defensive runs saved compared to Hayes' 65 and Robinson's 36. Machado's 57 and Arenado's 52 are very impressive, and Longoria posted an excellent 56 in his first 3 years. But Beltre? Just 21. Hayes is on a better pace than all but Chapman. Unfortunately, Chapman couldn't keep it up. But we're not done with Baseball Reference. Looking at the respective defensive B-wars, since this will tell us how much more valuable defensively these gents were compared to their peers, and wouldn't you know it, Hayes stacks up beautifully. Same as with our R-field number, Matt Chapman is the only third baseman in baseball history to put up a higher defensive B-war than Ke'Bryan Hayes in their first 380 or so games. Seriously, look it up. Literally everyone else. Chapman's 7.9 mark over his first 384 games is historic. Remind me of Hayes' mark again? Oh yeah, 7.7. For comparison's sake to those mentioned earlier, Machado actually comes in next at 7.2, with Arenado and Longoria coming in at 6.6 and 6.2 respectively, Robinson at 4.5, and Beltre rounded out the herd at 2.3. if Chapman could only have kept it going. But if Hayes can keep up this pace for as long as Brooks played, he'll finish with an insane 53.9 career defensive B-WAR. Theoretically, of course. Brooks Robinson's all-time mark for third baseman sits at 39.1, and Ozzie Smith's all-time record sits at 44.2. Safe to say, if all goes according to plan, and that's a big if.
But I'm feeling so lucky.
From a baseball reference standpoint, Ke'Bryan Hayes has a legit shot at history. So what about Fangraphs? Just like Baseball Reference, Fangraphs is also a treasure trove for us baseball stat junkies. It just has a few differences at all. And it's no different when it comes to defense. So we'd be fools if we ignored it on this occasion. But if we are keeping it real, the new defensive stats that we are using Fangraphs for, well, they are dependent on data that we just don't have for players prior to the 2000s.
Welcome to the future!
This means we don't know what Brooks Robinson's ultimate zone rating was, for example. Probably phenomenal. But that's still a big piece that is missing. Fangraphs' defensive runs saved is similar. They do use a total zone stat as a replacement for when defensive runs saved is missing, so we can still compare Hayes to Brooks in some capacity, but that's why this leaderboard is missing some folks. With that in mind though, in regard to Fangraphs' defensive runs saved, Ke'Bryan Hayes is still on a historic pace. In 374 games as a third baseman, he's accumulated a massive 65 defensive runs saved. Brooks Robinson doesn't show up on the leaderboard, but posted a 294 total zone in 2,896 games. And Adrian Beltre, the current listed career leader in defensive runs saved, posted 200 in 2,759 career games, or again, about 7 times as many games as Hayes. This means, just like the Baseball Reference Arfield stat, if Hayes can keep his current pace, he'll blow away the record with a theoretical 455 defensive runs saved. But again, that's a big if. Nolan Arenado actually does have a legit shot at setting the bar a little higher for Hayes. But even Arenado, as amazing as he's been, had a dip in defensive production previously in his career. And Hayes did capture the Gold Glove in 2023. Fangraphs does also have their defense stat. This allows us to compare players who play different positions. And again, big if, but if Hayes keeps this up, he's going to end up near the top of that leaderboard too. In fact, if he plays at this level for 2,800 games, his theoretical 333.9 defense would rank him second all time behind only Yadier Molina. But a lot can happen. I get it. Matt Chapman, Evan Longoria, and Manny Machado all started hot, but couldn't keep it going in regard to defensive runs saved. It's also only fair to point out that Fangraphs' UZR rating, it doesn't speak as highly to Hayes' defense. He posted just a 15.9 UZR so far in his career. Even if he kept this pace, he wouldn't surpass Beltre. In fact, Beltre, Longoria, Chapman, Arenado, and Machado have all had better 380-game stretches when it comes to UZR. And again, Brooks Robinson doesn't even have a number to compare to. So if you don't want to give Hayes the defensive crown based on that, I get it. It's tough when we don't have complete data for everyone.
It's not that hard, Scott. Tell him, Wash.
It's incredibly hard.
But the value in the newer, more specific defensive data moving forward is amazing. And speaking of advancements in player statistical data, we have to look at what Baseball Savant and their stats tell us. The advancements in what we can track and how accurately we can track things these days is amazing. Baseball Savant is a huge part of that. But just as with Fangraphs, we don't have data for older players, specifically prior to 2016. But we can still see how dominant Hayes has been defensively to start his career from Baseball Savant's outs above average and runs prevented perspectives. And surprise, surprise, if Hayes keeps this up, again big if, It won't be about passing someone on an all-time leaderboard, but it might be about setting a bar too high for anyone to beat. So far in his young career, he's posted 50 outs above average and 38 runs prevented. The only two players with better numbers since 2016, Nolan Arenado with an insane 92 OAA and 72 runs prevented, and Matt Chapman with an OAA of 52 to pair with 39 runs prevented. Arenado's numbers are on a different level right now, and that's also without the first 3 years of Arenado's career included, which were 3 of his best defensively.
This is a bummer, man. That's a bummer.
But we can only work with what we do know, and we know that if Hayes even just replicates Arenado's games played total from 2016 to 2023 of 1,127 games, or about 3 times as many as Hayes has now, and continues his current level of defense, theoretically he could put up roughly 150 outs above average and 114 runs prevented. That'd rank him higher than any other player in Baseball Savant's data, not just third baseman. But as I have said many times before, we are assuming some pretty big things. Health and consistent production, that's not even counting unforeseen issues. It's almost impossible to do what Brooks Robinson did. So why might Hayes not actually do this? Okay, we get it. Ke'Bryan Hayes is a defensive wizard. Take your choice of statistical provider, and Hayes has the potential to set some all-time marks. But the best defensive third baseman ever? Well, this isn't our first rodeo.
Giddy up.
Sure, in some ways, Hayes is doing things to start his career that we've never seen before. Brooks Robinson didn't start out this well. Neither did Adrian Beltre. Matt Chapman and Evan Longoria did have hotter starts, but couldn't maintain that high level of play. Nolan Arenado is probably the closest we are going to get to Brooks until Hayes' career plays out more, due to how Arenado has been able to stay healthy while also playing at such a high level defensively for his entire career. And those are 2 things that could get in Hayes' way. Ke'Bryan Hayes already has a bit of an injury history. He missed a big part of his rookie year battling a wrist injury on top of other small things throughout his career. But when he's played, as the numbers show, his glove has been elite. The other thing that history has shown us, that production can dip out of seemingly nowhere, thanks to how much goes into statistical calculations. Matt Chapman is a great example. To the common fan, his defense probably doesn't appear to have dipped over the years. Sure, maybe he hasn't made the highlight reel as much, but he still won Gold Gloves in 2021 and 2023. His R-Field numbers from 2020 through 2023 though, a total of 26 compared to a total of 66 in his first 3 years. But 2020 was sort of a wash due to COVID, and that's another reason Hayes might not do this. Shit happens. Just ask the 94 Expos.
How dare you?
If baseball has to cancel a season for some terrible reason, that could absolutely put a dent in his chances at history. Another thing he can't control, how good his peers are. Defensive B-WAR is relative to a replacement level player for a given year. Are Brooks Robinson's defensive B-WAR numbers higher because replacement level players were worse? That will also impact potential Gold Gloves. Arenado had his own streak broken by Hayes in 2023. Folks will, unfairly, hold that against Arenado. But will anyone win 16 straight Gold Gloves like Brooks? Probably not. And that just might mean that we have some really good third basemen at the same time. That's a good thing. But you could speculate all day. Based on all of the numbers right now, does Ke'Bryan Hayes, if all goes right, have a legit chance at being considered the best defensive third baseman ever? So after all of that, what do we think? Is Ke'Bryan Hayes going to end up as the best defensive third baseman ever? Well, like I said at the beginning of this video, hold on to your butts, Pirates fans, because honestly, I think it's going to take everything going right for Hayes. What he's done in just a short period of time is absolutely impressive. From a baseball reference perspective, he has a real shot at setting the all-time defensive runs saved and defensive B-WAR marks for a third baseman. Same for defensive runs saved for Fangraphs. Sure, that UZR crown may never be his, but hey, he does have a real chance at those Baseball Savant outs above average and runs prevented crowns. If Arenado doesn't set the bar too high, that is. But deep down, the point isn't who was the best. Hayes is a defensive wizard. So was Brooks. We're also missing a lot of data for Brooks. And Arenado, and Chapman, Longoria, Machado, heck, there are so many guys we didn't even mention. The point of this, though, to simply appreciate the defensive wizardry while we can. Because one day, it might just be history. That's going to do it for today, baseball fans. Thanks so much for watching. What do you think? Who is your favorite defensive third baseman of all time? Let me know down below. Please consider subscribing if you haven't. Check out my other videos, and please leave a like if you did enjoy yourself. I know I did. But until next time, baseball fans, cheers!